In a previous video, I talked about mixed levels in language classes, like if you have a Spanish 3, 4, and AP all in the same class. But what if you don't officially have mixed levels, but the students in your classes are not all the same level? This could be because some of them are heritage speakers. It could be because some of them had prior exposure to the language and they're not really beginners, even though they're in a first level class. Or it could just be that some of them have picked up on some of the elements of the language more quickly in earlier classes than others. Whatever the reason, you might find yourself having to differentiate your instruction in your class for your different learners. This is very difficult when you have a large class or when you have completely different levels in the same class, when you have students who are bored with beginning level work because they're too advanced. Or if you have a higher level class and some of the students are frustrated because they are not higher level. All of these situations can be handled in different ways if your school is open to, for example, considering starting a heritage learner track so that they are not in the first level of the language with the brand new beginners. That would be ideal, but you're always going to have some necessity to differentiate for the learners in your classroom. Now, there are some strategies that you can implement. For example, if you have to teach a certain grammar point, but some of the students are able to use it in context and others really are not because they don't have the background, you really have to think about what the most important outcome is. Is the most important outcome that they all learn the grammar point and are able to produce it on a discrete point test? Or is the most important objective that they are able to develop their proficiency so that they're able to understand better what's going on in class and use the language more and build on it in the future? Now, obviously, we want both of these to be true, especially if you have to give the discrete point grammar test. But think about how you can structure your activities so that they are able to use what they're learning as tools for their developing proficiency and accomplish the communicative objective, whether that be reading, writing, listening, speaking, in the moment, whether or not they are able to implement the new grammar point in doing so. For example, if you have to have the students give recommendations to each other and some students are able to do it with the new grammar and others are not, how can you do it as a class and then turn them loose individually and in pairs or groups to do it on their own, even for those students who are not able to implement the new grammar? For example, in Spanish, that would be using the subjunctive, but that's quite difficult. And really, students aren't going to be developing that with the amount of time that they are spending on the language. They're not going to be able to do that spontaneously in any of the levels that we teach up until the very highest levels. So how can we create an activity for the students to be able to give each other recommendations or suggestions when they haven't mastered the subjunctive? Now, one way to do that is by breaking it down as a class and brainstorming ideas, figuring out how to say it in the target language, and then giving them a little hint for how to produce those forms correctly and writing those forms on the board so that when they get back in their groups, they can use the board to see the forms that they need to produce in the activity. Another way is to give them a workaround, some phrases that are set phrases that don't require them to produce spontaneously the grammar with all of the verbs that they might need to use for the recommendations. There are some set phrases. For example, in Spanish, one phrase roughly translates to, "Would you do me the favor of?" And if you use that phrase, you don't actually have to conjugate the verbs using the new grammar. And so that is not exactly the same as giving recommendations, but hopefully it gives you an idea for how you can have them use circumlocution or talk around the part that they don't know, give them some set phrases, some sentence starters where they don't have to use the new grammar in context 100% of the time, and yet they can still accomplish the activity. That way they're able to increase their proficiency and their ability to communicate in different types of situations and still accomplish the objective, even if they're not all at the same level. I hope this helps you differentiate your instruction. For more tips, please check us out at Teaching Solved on YouTube and on Instagram. Thanks so much.